It was an ordinary afternoon, and the lavish boutique in the heart of New York City was alive with activity. Inside, the soft hum of sophisticated conversation and the clinking of glasses echoed as the store's elite clientele explored the latest couture collections. A team of perfectly trained associates fluttered about, offering impeccable service to the city's wealthiest and most influential patrons. The boutique was a sanctuary of exclusivity, a place where only the crème de la crème could indulge in the finest fashions the world had to offer. Everything was polished, pristine, and carefully orchestrated until the doors of the boutique opened and a single figure stepped inside. Melania Trump, the former First Lady, known for her elegance, grace, and impeccable taste, entered the boutique like a wave crashing into the shore. Instantly, the room went silent. Conversations ceased. Champagne flutes froze mid-air. Every eye in the boutique turned toward her as she moved through the store, her presence undeniable. The cameras that had previously been trained on the latest arrivals shifted, clicking rapidly as flashbulbs illuminated her every move. She was a living legend, a fashion icon, a symbol of power, beauty, and grace. But that was about to change. The tension in the room escalated as an unspoken unease began to settle over the boutique's polished marble floors. Among the staff, the manager, a sharp and impeccably put-together woman named Jacqueline Hart, was watching. Jacqueline had built a reputation in the world of luxury fashion for her no-nonsense approach. She was a woman who commanded respect, and no one, not even the most powerful and influential figures, was above the rules of her boutique. She had a knack for reading people, for knowing exactly who belonged and who did not. As Melania strolled through the store, Jacqueline observed her closely. There was something in the air, something off, an energy that was hard to ignore. The manager's eyes narrowed, her fingers twitching slightly as she made a subtle motion toward one of the floor attendants. Words passed between them, and it was clear that something was about to unfold. The atmosphere in the boutique began to thicken, as though the air itself had turned heavy. The usual quiet hum of affluence was replaced with a suffocating silence, the kind that can only come from a simmering conflict about to explode. Jacqueline stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply against the marble as she walked with deliberate purpose toward Melania. The former First Lady, at first unaware of what was unfolding, was in the midst of inspecting a delicate piece of jewelry, a platinum necklace encrusted with diamonds. But the moment she felt Jacqueline's gaze upon her, something shifted. Melania turned, her expression unreadable. As Jacqueline stopped just a few feet away, the room seemed to hold its breath. Without hesitation, Jacqueline spoke. Her voice, sharp and cold, sliced through the tension in the room. "You're not welcome here today, Mrs. Trump." The words fell like a thunderclap, reverberating across the boutique, leaving a trail of stunned silence in their wake. Melania's eyes widened, her posture straightening in disbelief. The shock on her face was palpable, her lips parting in surprise. It was as though the entire room had collectively held its breath, unsure of what would happen next. "You're going to have to leave," Jacqueline continued, her tone unwavering. "We don't tolerate certain kinds of behavior in this establishment." For a moment, Melania said nothing. She blinked, perhaps trying to process the suddenness of it all. She had spent her life walking in spaces like this, surrounded by luxury and power, always in control. To be spoken to in such a manner, with such coldness, was utterly foreign to her. The room, once filled with hushed murmurs, now buzzed with whispers. Patrons exchanged glances, trying to make sense of what was happening. Cameras clicked, capturing every moment. A few onlookers were already making bets in their minds. Was this some sort of publicity stunt? Was it a social experiment? But no one had any answers. The tension was unbearable. Melania's face tightened as she looked at Jacqueline, her lips pressed into a thin line. The former First Lady had faced many challenges in her life, from being in the public eye to navigating the complexities of politics. But this was different. She had never been humiliated in such a way, and yet there she stood, in front of a luxury boutique she had once patronized, being told she wasn't welcome. "How dare you?" Melania finally spoke, her voice smooth but laced with an undercurrent of fury. "You have no right to treat me like this. Do you know who I am?" Jacqueline's expression remained stoic, her eyes never leaving Melania's. "I know exactly who you are, and that's the problem." Her voice remained unflinching, cold as ice. "We are not a place for people who thrive on controversy, scandal, and disrespect. The people who shop here value discretion, sophistication, and class. You've brought none of that with you today." Gasps rippled through the crowd as Jacqueline's words hit like a punch to the gut. Melania's face flushed with a mix of anger and disbelief. How dare this woman, this boutique manager, speak to her in such a way? "I have been a loyal patron of this boutique for years," Melania retorted, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. "You don't know anything about me or my life." Jacqueline's eyes remained cold. "Maybe not, but I do know this. Your presence here has tainted the environment, and that's something we cannot allow." The weight of Jacqueline's words hung heavy in the air. Melania stood still for a moment, her fingers curling into fists at her sides. The crowd watched, unsure of what to expect next. Would Melania leave in a huff, storming out of the store? Would she challenge Jacqueline's authority? Or would something even more shocking happen? In a move that no one anticipated, Melania's features softened for the briefest moment. A quiet resignation washed over her face as if she were calculating the best way to respond. Then, without a word, she turned on her heel and began to walk toward the exit. But the room was not prepared for what happened next. As Melania reached the door, she stopped. Slowly, she turned back toward Jacqueline, a chilling calm in her demeanor. "You have no idea what you've just done," Melania said softly, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying with it an unmistakable edge of threat. "I will make sure the world knows about this." The words were simple, but the impact was immediate. The entire room seemed to freeze, as if everyone had suddenly realized that this wasn't just a moment of humiliation. This was the beginning of something much larger. The former First Lady wasn't just being disrespected, she was being pushed into a corner. And everyone in that room knew that when Melania Trump was pushed into a corner, she would fight back. With a final glance at the stunned boutique staff and the watching crowd, she turned and exited the store, her heels clicking sharply against the floor as she walked out into the New York City streets. Jacqueline stood still, her face unreadable, as the boutique slowly came back to life. But no one was the same. The energy in the room had shifted, something had broken, and it was clear that the reverberations of this moment would be felt long after the doors closed behind Melania Trump. But what would happen next? What consequences would Jacqueline face? What would Melania do in retaliation? And who would come to her defense, or perhaps her downfall? The boutique may have regained its composure, but the rest of the world would be watching, waiting to see how the story unfolded. And in the world of luxury, power, and high society, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The boutique doors closed behind Melania Trump with a soft chime, the sound carrying through the tense silence that lingered in the store. A moment ago, the room had been alive with whispers and gasps, each person reeling from the sudden turn of events. Now, all that was left was the heavy air of confusion and intrigue. Melania, usually so poised and unshakable, had walked out without a word. Her exit was smooth, her back straight, her gaze forward, but those who had been close enough could see the faint tremor of disbelief in her eyes. It was the only sign of the internal storm brewing beneath her calm exterior. The boutique slowly came back to life, the hum of luxury and wealth creeping back into the atmosphere. But the unsettling events of the past few minutes had left a mark. No one in the room could fully process what had just occurred. How could this have happened? Why had Jacqueline, the manager, acted with such unexpected harshness? And why had Melania, of all people, been so calmly humiliated in front of everyone? No answers were forthcoming, but within hours, the story had exploded across the airwaves. News outlets, blogs, and social media platforms were flooded with speculation. Videos of the incident were quickly posted online, each clip more shocking than the last. The image of Melania being dismissed so coldly, her pride clearly bruised, was too much for the public to ignore. The world had questions, and they weren't about to let it go. Why had the former First Lady, a woman with decades of impeccable reputation, been treated in such a manner? What had triggered Jacqueline's seemingly out-of-nowhere response? The boutique, after all, had catered to the elite for years. Melania had been a frequent patron and her status was undeniable. So why this sudden animosity? Was there more to it than a simple difference in taste? Or had something deeper and darker been at play? As the story unfolded, the answers remained elusive. Public speculation ran rampant. Some claimed that Jacqueline had acted out of personal animosity, that there was some sort of personal history between the two women that no one knew about. Others wondered if it was a calculated act, some form of silent protest against the former First Lady's controversial political ties. And then, there were those who hinted at something more mysterious. Perhaps it was a hidden feud, a long simmering grudge that had finally boiled over into public view. The questions kept coming, but no one could provide a definitive answer. Meanwhile, in the hours following her exit, Melania remained out of sight, her whereabouts a mystery. She had always been a figure of poise and grace, rarely ever flustered by the drama of the world around her. But this was different. This wasn't just an embarrassing moment. This was a public humiliation. And Melania Trump wasn't a woman known for taking such things lying down. Behind the scenes, the former First Lady's team was working feverishly to craft a response. Melania, always strategic, wasn't one to rush into action without a well-thought-out plan. She had been underestimated before, and she knew the power of silence. But this time, something told her that silence wouldn't be enough. Then, a cryptic message appeared on her official social media accounts. It was short, direct, and to the point. The truth always finds its way to the surface. But some stories are not meant to be told in public. Not yet. The post sparked even more speculation. What truth was Melania alluding to? And why had she made the decision to withhold it? The public's thirst for answers grew more insatiable by the hour. Meanwhile, in the boutique, Jacqueline Hart remained tight-lipped. She refused to comment to the press, her stoic face betraying nothing. But those who knew her well began to sense a growing unease. She had always been confident, calculating, and above all, careful. But this felt different. Was it possible that she had acted without thinking? Could she have miscalculated the fallout from her decision? It didn't take long for rumors to spread that Jacqueline herself was under investigation. Some suggested that her harsh behavior might have been a prelude to something far more sinister, something that could explain her willingness to risk alienating one of the world's most influential women. Was she acting on behalf of someone else? Were there hidden forces at play behind the scenes, pulling her strings? Or was Jacqueline simply following her instincts, standing up for something she believed in? Days passed, and the story continued to unfold in unexpected ways. The tension surrounding the incident grew with every passing hour. What was happening behind closed doors? What was Melania planning? Then, just as the world seemed to be losing patience waiting for answers, a new development emerged. Melania Trump had hired a top-tier investigative firm. The public reaction was immediate. The intrigue, the mystery, it was all starting to take shape. This wasn't going to be a simple scandal or a fleeting moment of humiliation. No, this was something much bigger. Melania wasn't simply going to let this slide. She was digging deeper, and she was determined to uncover the truth. But the twist? No one knew who or what she was targeting. Was it Jacqueline? Was it the boutique itself? Or was there a much larger story at play? One that no one had anticipated. In the weeks that followed, the story seemed to take on a life of its own. The media hounded both Melania and Jacqueline, their every move scrutinized under the microscope of public opinion. But through it all, Melania remained poised, the quiet strength she had always possessed now fueling her determination. She wasn't finished. And if there was one thing the world knew about her, it was that when Melania Trump set her mind to something, she would stop at nothing to see it through. But just when it seemed that the storm had reached its peak, an unexpected ally stepped forward, one that no one had seen coming. The name that flashed across news screens was one that sent shockwaves through the industry: Ivanka Trump, Melania's own daughter. Could it be that Ivanka was somehow involved in the aftermath of the boutique incident? Was she fighting alongside her mother to uncover the truth? The revelation threw everything into disarray. Was this a mother-daughter battle against those who had wronged them? Or was there something even more insidious lurking beneath the surface? One thing was certain: the world would have to wait for Melania's next move. Because the quiet exit from the boutique was far from the end of the story. In fact, it was just the beginning of a far more complex and dangerous game. The question now was, how far would she go to uncover the truth? And who would be left standing when all was said and done? The sun had barely risen over New York City when the news spread like wildfire. Melania Trump was returning to the boutique. The very same boutique where just 24 hours earlier, she had been humiliated in front of the city's elite. The boutique, which had once been a symbol of refinement and exclusivity, now stood at the center of a scandal that everyone was talking about. And now it seemed Melania was coming back to settle the score. It was a chilly morning, the kind of day when the city felt alive with possibility. Yet, There was an eerie quiet that seemed to settle over the boutique as soon as she stepped inside. The usual hum of luxury shopping, the soft murmur of well-heeled patrons, the rustle of garments. All of it ceased the moment Melania entered. The doors had only just closed behind her, but it felt like the entire world had paused, waiting for what would come next. Melania Trump, former First Lady, fashion icon, and one of the most photographed women in the world, stood at the threshold of the boutique. She was dressed in an understated yet strikingly elegant ensemble, a tailored coat, a classic pair of sunglasses, and a look of steely determination that made it clear she wasn't here for a shopping spree. No, this visit was something entirely different. The boutique staff froze, their gazes flickering toward the manager, Jacqueline Hart, who had previously orchestrated Melania's abrupt and public ejection. Jacqueline had always been the epitome of control, the embodiment of poise in the world of luxury. But today, she was different. Her face, which had once been an impassive mask of authority, was now clouded with unease. It was the first time anyone had seen her falter, and it was clear to everyone that Melania's presence had unsettled her. Jacqueline tried to compose herself, smoothing her impeccably tailored blouse, but the cold sweat that gathered on her brow told a different story. She wasn't ready for this. No one had expected Melania's return, and certainly no one had expected her to return so soon, and with such purpose. With every step Melania took into the store, the tension in the room grew. The staff exchanged nervous glances, but no one dared to speak. It was as though the boutique had become a pressure cooker, each second building upon the last. Melania didn't acknowledge Jacqueline at first. Instead, she walked straight past her, her eyes scanning the boutique with quiet intensity. She moved with the grace of someone who had been here many times before, but this time, the atmosphere was entirely different. Her every move felt deliberate, her gaze sharp as though she were piecing together something only she could see. The manager, Jacqueline, stood frozen, watching as Melania approached the counter, the very same counter where she had been dismissed the day before. The memories of that moment still hung thick in the air, the public humiliation of a woman who had been, for so long, untouchable in the eyes of the world. Jacqueline tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. "Mrs. Trump," Jacqueline began, but her words trailed off. Her attempt at authority felt hollow, out of place, as though she were grasping for control she no longer had. Melania's gaze never left the counter as she walked up to it, her heels clicking with purpose. It was a sound that seemed to reverberate through the silence, a reminder that she was in control now. When she reached the counter, she stopped, her posture straight and unyielding. Then, without turning to face Jacqueline, she spoke. "I've come to get answers," Melania said, her voice quiet but firm. There was no trace of the humiliation from the day before, no sign of the woman who had walked out in shock. This was a different Melania, the one who never backed down, the one who had built her name and reputation through sheer will. The manager stiffened at her words, but it was clear that she didn't know how to respond. She had anticipated Melania's reaction, sure, but she hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected the former First Lady to return so calmly, so collected. Jacqueline's hands trembled slightly, betraying the mask of confidence she had so carefully crafted for years. "Answers?" Jacqueline managed to say, though the words sounded weak, almost defensive. "Mrs. Trump, I don't want an explanation," Melania interrupted, her voice cold as she turned to face the manager for the first time. "I want the truth." The room held its breath. The staff, still frozen, couldn't take their eyes off the scene unfolding before them. It was as if a new power had entered the room and they were all powerless to stop it. Jacqueline took a step back, her hand instinctively reaching for the counter as if to steady herself. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but even as the words left her lips, her expression faltered. There was something in her eyes now, something that suggested she knew more than she was letting on. Melania didn't flinch. She held Jacqueline's gaze, unblinking. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. Yesterday you humiliated me in front of everyone here. You made a scene. You accused me of something that I didn't do. So, I'm here to understand why. What was your motive? What did you think would happen when you publicly insulted me? The room grew colder, and the tension was palpable. The boutique, once a place of elegance, now felt like a battleground. The staff watched in silence, caught between their loyalty to Jacqueline and the undeniable force of Melania's presence. Jacqueline swallowed hard, her breath shaky. She was cornered, and everyone in the room knew it. The weight of Melania's words hung heavily in the air, each syllable an accusation. And for the first time, Jacqueline's impeccable composure cracked. Her eyes darted nervously around the room, as though searching for a way out. I didn't want it to go this far, Jacqueline stammered, her voice barely a whisper. But it wasn't just you. I had to make a stand. There are forces at play here, bigger than you or me. I couldn't ignore them. I couldn't. Melania's eyes narrowed. Forces at play? What are you talking about? Melania pressed, her voice now colder than ice. Jacqueline's face paled as if the weight of the truth was too much to bear. She seemed to hesitate for a moment, as if deciding whether to reveal what had been hidden in the shadows. Finally, she exhaled, her shoulders sagging in defeat.